Good evening, I'm Tom Murphy. Welcome to a special Maritimes edition of CBC News. We begin tonight with the latest cases of COVID-19 in the region. In Nova Scotia, there were 34 new cases identified today, bringing the provincial total to 407. 2 people have been killed by the virus. Those are the only deaths so far in the Maritimes. 8 people are in hospital, including 4 in the intensive care unit. So far, 93 Nova Scotians have made a full recovery. In New Brunswick, 1 new case has been identified, bringing the total there to 112. 5 people are currently in hospital, including 3 in the ICU. To date, 60 New Brunswickers have recovered. And on PEI, no new cases were announced today. That leaves the provincial total at 25. At this point, none of those islanders are being treated in hospital, and 17 of them are now considered recovered. More staff at a Halifax seniors residence have tested positive for COVID-19. Northwood says an additional 5 employees have been diagnosed with the virus. That brings the total to 9 staff members. 2 health services staff and 3 home care workers have also been infected. 5 residents of the Halifax complex have also contracted COVID-19. They've been moved to an isolated floor dedicated to treating patients. The pandemic has led to some dramatic changes in the way Nova Scotia treats cancer patients. They're particularly high risk because of their compromised immune systems. The Canadian Cancer Society says that has left many desperate for emotional support during an already difficult time. Carolyn Ray reports.
Staff at Nova Scotia's cancer care program have had to make decisions they never anticipated they would have to make. They have had to postpone surgeries, and that is because surgeries take up so many resources, and they also use quite a bit of protective gear, so that needs to be reserved for COVID-19. They've also changed the way they do radiation or radiotherapy. Now patients are actually getting a higher dose so they don't have to come into the building as often. This is something that was being tested slowly before the pandemic but has now been ramped up because of it. It's considered to be cutting edge treatment. Also, if a support person wants to come in, unfortunately they can't anymore. So if somebody wants to support someone going through chemotherapy, they have to use FaceTime. And again, that's to limit traffic within the hospital because cancer patients have compromised immune systems, so they're even more susceptible if they contract COVID-19. Now, through all of this, as I'm sure you can imagine, it is adding quite a bit of stress on the patients. They've been reaching out to the Canadian Cancer Society. It tells me in March they received about 25% more calls and inquiries over the email and online support groups. They say people are really emotional at this time. They're quite stressed out, and they're hoping to alleviate that and work more on that piece to help people answer their questions, people who don't know what will happen to their treatments. But the hospital and the Nova Scotia Health Authority is asking people to be patient as they're making these very difficult decisions. They say they hope it won't last too much longer, and they're making them carefully in order to help more people in the long run. Carolyn Ray, CBC News, Halifax.
A Nova Scotia man is facing a charge of attempted murder over a shooting yesterday in Terrence Bay. Police say there was an altercation between 2 men. One of them left the scene and returned with a gun. A 46-year-old man was shot but is expected to recover. 37-year-old Jeffrey Paul Mason was arrested at a nearby home. Police say it was not a random act. People in New Brunswick had another reason to stay inside today. A spring storm swept through the province overnight with high winds knocking out power for some people this morning. It also left behind heavy snow for people to dig out. Gary Moore has that story.
It's spring in the Maritimes, which means it's not safe to put away snowblowers and shovels for the season. A late winter wallop smacked New Brunswick with high winds and heavy snow. It's not completely uncommon to get a blast of winter in April, but it can still catch us by surprise.
How common is it to get a blast of winter like this in your experience around here in Fredericton?
Well, that was a close call. Mike Walker says even though the snow was just about gone, it doesn't make it easier for his crews clearing streets and roads.
For instance, today, with the snowbanks being gone and the sidewalks completely covered, with everything being so soft, there's a lot of risk of some lawn damage occurring. So we're going to be real careful with how we plow, especially into our neighborhoods.
The spring blast of winter brought heavy snow and high winds, which created some problems for NB Power. At one point Friday morning, there were over 5,000 customers without power in the province. Any other spring, a blast of winter may not have been so welcome. But with people staying home because of COVID-19, Chris Goodwin says it was oddly a sigh of relief.
But yeah, it's a little change of scenery, no pun intended, get outside. Like I said, I don't mind shoveling. It's a little bit of exercise, gets out of the house. Sybil gets out of the house, so it's good for both of us.
Sophie and Ellie Frenette in St. John also made the best out of a snowy situation. They traded in the traditional snowman for Easter eggs that marked the spring storm. The question is this the last we'll see of winter for this season? Only time will tell. Gary Moore, CBC News, Fredericton.
People in Charlottetown are being asked to stay away from the boardwalk in Victoria Park today. That's after storm surge made its way over the breaker wall, flooding part of the road. The area is closed to all traffic until the water recedes. Charlottetown Public Works called it the perfect storm of melting snow due to warmer temperatures and high tide. Officials say the water should go down once the tide goes out and are asking anyone walking in the area to be careful. The ferry service between PEI and Nova Scotia should be ready to begin for the season on May 1st, but the crossing is going to look a lot different this year, at least until restrictions relating to COVID-19 are lifted. The ferry will only be taking 50% of its vehicle capacity per trip, and passengers will have to stay in their vehicle. The restaurant and gift shop won't be open for crossings. Passengers will also be screened for the coronavirus before boarding. The company says it is also adopting new cleaning and disinfecting procedures. Right now, only essential travel is permitted between the provinces. That includes truckers and health workers. Some PEI restaurants will now be able to sell alcohol with food orders people place for takeout. It's a move many in the industry say will help them cope during COVID-19 shutdowns. The PEI Liquor Commission sent a notice of the changes yesterday. Licensed restaurants can now sell unopened alcohol to people along with takeout food orders. Alcohol can only be purchased with food items approved by the Commission. People can buy up to 2 bottles of wine or 2 bottles of spirits or 12 cans of beer per order. These changes don't apply to delivery orders. And in Charlottetown, the city has closed all its sports and multi-purpose courts until further notice to make sure Islanders are staying physically distant while outdoors. Those closures include the skateboard park, tennis courts, basketball courts, and ball hockey rinks. The city says it's taking the guidance and recommendations of provincial and federal health officials on COVID-19. It wants Islanders to exercise regularly, but that should only be done safely, close to home, and while maintaining a distance of 2 meters from other people. A decision on when they can reopen will be made at a later date. Well, this is a particularly important time of year for religious people. For Christians, today is Good Friday. This week marked the beginning of Jewish Passover, and Ramadan begins for Muslims later this month. But with all the restrictions on gatherings these days, religious services are taking on a whole new look. The Sunday morning bustle at St. Benedict Catholic Church in Halifax is gone. The church bell, silent. These pews haven't seen a parishioner in weeks.
Just because we've shut the doors to our church and the church is closed, that building is closed, doesn't mean the church is closed.
And at a time like this, that's a fundamental question people are asking. What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? What's the point of all this suffering?
Whoever you are, you're most welcome to join us today, and we believe that God has a special blessing for you.
It's why they decided to become even more social, ramping up their live stream broadcast of Sunday Mass, last week reaching 10,000 viewers.
I'm a bit of a big deal on YouTube.
I kind of always had a sense that my preaching would empty the church one day. It just happened a lot sooner than I thought it would.
Creating that spiritual space can be a particular challenge in the Jewish faith. A minyan or quorum of 10 would usually be required for certain religious obligations.
We've also been very creative and yet still authentic in the way in which we've solved certain religious problems with regard to weddings. Was able to co-officiate at a wedding a week ago.
We're here for you during this time of anxiety
And not just weddings.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat prayers, bar and bat mitzvahs, even coffee with the rabbi are all being done by Zoom.
It's the beginning of the telling of the story on the Seder plate.
In fact, Rabbi Wernick is hosting a virtual Seder, a ceremonial dinner to start Passover live from his home.
At times of disruption, you make allowances for what you might not otherwise make allowances for from a traditional religious perspective, because you have to live within the context in which you're living.
Yeah, we connect while we are quarantined together.
Muslims, too, are fighting the isolation of a pandemic as Ramadan approaches.
And now that Ramadan is coming, I think all of us are kind of thinking and feeling the burden of not being able to come together in a way that we usually do.
And for these women, it's something called Sisters Circle, a weekly online gathering to discuss what the faith means to them.
Being able to remind each other of what's important is really essential, because it's really, really easy to forget when you're not living that day to day.
Even in a time of isolation, there's strength in community and hope.
Whenever I feel a point of panic or when is this going to end and kind of insecure about the insecurity of it all, I'm just trying to remind myself that there is a plan, there are blessings in this.
And for some, there's faith that still burns bright in these dark times. Now another Good Friday tradition, a plate of fish and chips, but that too is looking quite different this year. Brooklyn Curry has that story.
In the near 75 years it's been open, Wilman's Fish and Chips in North End, Halifax has been a hotspot on Good Friday.
For a lot of Catholic people, they want fish and chips on Good Friday. It's a good day.
But this year, owner Lucien Namé is making some changes in the name of public health and safety. Only 3 customers can be inside at a time. The menu is limited to just fish and chips, for takeout only. As for help in the kitchen, Namé says it's become a family affair.
No staff. My wife, she's a teacher and she's helped me out, so it's been good. I'm thank her because I couldn't do it without her.
Namé bought half the fish he normally gets for Good Friday. He says he doesn't know how many people will stop by, but the phone's been ringing off the hook.
Just I'm thanking everybody is coming today. Hope they will understand what we're doing, how hard it is to serve in these circumstances.
A few blocks away, a nonprofit organization that normally takes Good Friday off is handing out takeaway meals to those in need.
A lot of things around us have closed because it's a holiday, so we made the decision to stay open today to make sure that people did still have access to a hot, nutritious lunch.
The Seoul Harbor Rescue Mission extended their service hours, so there's no lunch rush. Laxton says they're also working with minimal staff and volunteers.
So it takes a lot less of us to be able to process those bag lunches. We've gotten fairly good at it over the last couple of weeks, so the numbers have drastically reduced, obviously, and we also want to protect our volunteers and not have them here and being at risk if it's not absolutely necessary.
The organization typically hosts a large sit-down meal on Easter Monday, but Laxton says this year that will be takeout only too. Brooklyn Curry, CBC News, Halifax.
Federal government documents reveal a slow start to Canada's response to the growing global outbreak. Until early March, health officials had been saying the risk of transmission here was low. Today, the Prime Minister was asked about that and how long he expected the current restrictions to last. Vashi Capellos has more.
So 2 things specifically I'd focus on out of the Prime Minister's comments. The first is something we've all been talking about since hearing his comments yesterday, and the projections from public health officials as to how this virus will spread and kind of how long we can expect to be living the way we are.
According to the models we've put forward, it is possible that we will be able to be out of that wave this summer. And at that point, we will be able to talk about loosening up some of the rules that are in place, looking at particular sectors where people can go back to work, bringing in new rules around how people can interact with each other in society and get things rolling again.
Some kind of more normal life after that first wave, but still not a full return back to normal until the development of a vaccine. The second point I'd highlight was around some questions that came from my colleague Salima Shivji based on JP Tasker's story, looking at briefing notes that were supplied to the health minister over the course of this pandemic, really since it started in China back in January. And specifically, A note that told the health minister, based on the latest information that we have, there is no clear evidence that the virus is easily transmitted between people. That came from public health officials, or the Department of Public Health, to the health minister. Obviously, we know that isn't the case now. There were also sort of some flags in early February that PPE, the supply of personal protective equipment like those N95 masks, was in jeopardy, that it wasn't a very stable supply and that there would potentially be need for more.
As we look back, of course, there's going to be things we said, oh, we might have said this differently or that differently. There's going to be an awful lot of learning through this. But it remains that as we get through this now, as we live through the measures that we've put in place and lean on each other and hold together, we have the best chance of getting through this in the coming weeks and months.
I imagine there will continue to be questions from the opposition to the government, though, based on some of this reporting and reporting from other outlets about these briefing notes. And on that note, Parliament will actually be in session tomorrow. Parties are coming back to Ottawa, back to the House of Commons, to look at the wage subsidy legislation that needs to be passed in order for that program to get out the door, and more importantly, that money to get out the door to businesses. Vashi Capello, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Kiwanis Golden K Club of North Sydney is helping kids stuck at home keep busy. The club is giving away soil and seeds to young people in the area so they can do some indoor gardening. Members reached out to a local grocery, hardware, and farm stores for donations of seeds and soil, and they also bought some with their own money. The seed packs contain either vegetable or flower seeds. They were set up at the Sydney Mines Food Bank today with the packs on a table so people can keep their distance.
You have luck, like I say, growing it. Like a lot of children, if you ask them, they don't know where the food comes from. And, you know, it's our farmers and stuff out there, and, you know, we hope to get that out of it anyway.
Once the pandemic dies down, the group will give out prizes to the kids for their plants.
Our latest storm, which brought snow, rain, gusty winds, and storm surge, is on its way out. In behind, a pretty solid Saturday and Sunday for your Easter weekend. Your full forecast is coming up.
And meteorologist Ryan Snodden joins us now from his weather center at his house, of course. Ryan, not a very spring-like day in a good many parts of the Maritimes today.
Yeah, very wintry across, especially New Brunswick, Tom. That's where we obviously saw the brunt of the snow from this latest system that continues to track through the region. Upwards of 30 centimeters in some spots. Didier Lacroix said about 23 centimeters rather by mid-afternoon when he took this picture in Hoyt, New Brunswick, and a big thanks to him for this. Of course, snow just one part of the story in New Brunswick. These pictures were taken in St. Andrews, and unfortunately the Van Horn Trail, as you can see here, had some significant damage last night thanks to that storm surge that rolled in, and you can see where that is obviously going to need some massive repairs there in St. Andrews. Now, winds were also a huge part of the story. We had gusts of 91 in Yarmouth, and you can see 80 to 90 kilometers per hour in Halifax, 160 at Grand Etang. So this thing brought obviously some huge winds as well. Winds have backed off, but are still pretty gusty out there right now. Sustained winds in that 20 to 30 kilometer per hour range, widespread, upwards of 40 to 50 in some spots, especially down towards southwest Nova Scotia. You can see Sydney gusting to 76 at last check. And the good news is that those winds will continue to ease. There's the center of the low, which is basically over western PEI right now. We're still seeing showers, flurries, even some graupel. Yes, graupel, snow pellets mixing in with this system across mainland Nova Scotia this afternoon. Had a big round of graupel here in the backyard in Bedford. That low continues to track to the east, slowly but surely. And you can see that colder air that's being funneled around the system will make for a cooler night tonight and into Saturday, but overall not too bad. Here's how things are going to play out. So showers and flurry chances this evening, mixing over to just flurry chances overnight and into early Saturday. Note those winds continuing to taper off. By the time we get to tomorrow morning, we're gusting upwards of 40 to 50 kilometers per hour. Temperatures starting in the 0 to -3 range across the board. Now, looking ahead into your Saturday, we will see those flurry chances for the most part coming to an end, but an isolated risk of a flurry continuing. Eastern mainland Nova Scotia, Cape Breton, isolated flurry chances for Cape Breton, or PEI rather, and then a pop-up chance of a shower or wet flurry continuing into the afternoon, especially in those onshore winds over the northeast parts of Nova Scotia and southwest Nova Scotia. Pretty quiet across New Brunswick tomorrow, mainly cloudy skies there. Isolated flurry chance in Edmundston and the northwest. Now, as we roll through Saturday night into Sunday, we're really going to see this area of high pressure settle in, which is great. And Sunday looks like a terrific day. We'll build the clouds up a little bit into the afternoon, but overall, Sunday is going to be a terrific one for your Easter Sunday. Again, stay close to home, but try and get out and soak up some of that sunshine, soak up some of that vitamin D. 7 and 8 degrees across northern regions will be 8 and 9, even some double-digit potentials for Nova Scotia. The best shot will be the South Shore in and around the Bridgewater area. Now, as we roll ahead into Sunday night and Monday, our next system will move in. It's going to look a lot different than this latest system. Increasing clouds, shower chances moving in as early as Monday morning, but really ramping up into the afternoon, and then periods of rain and drizzle on the go late day Monday, more so Monday evening into the overnight, tracking in from west to east, but mild with this one as well. Talking about the potential for some double digits, not only for southern New Brunswick, but also southwest Nova Scotia. Could hit 12 degrees in the valley. A little bit of sun possible for Cape Breton on the leading edge of that system. That one's gone. And have a look at this Tuesday afternoon setup. Showers move out, some sunshine breaks through. Forecast models flirting with the potential for some mid-teen temperatures across Nova Scotia on Tuesday afternoon. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that. And we'll want to soak that up because just as that warm air moves out, we've got another system to track for early next week, which, Tom, may have some snow mixing in with it. So mid-April in the Maritimes, basically the story here is prepare for absolutely everything.
You said it. All right, Ryan Snodden, thank you very much. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. All right, before we go, check out the scene last night in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Much of Dartmouth gathered on their balconies and front steps at 7 o'clock to show their support for healthcare workers. The balconies at the Kings Wharf development were full of people clapping and using noisemakers. And what a noise they made. Music to the ears of many. Kings Wharf is just a few minutes away from the Dartmouth General Hospital. What a great way to show their appreciation for the workers on the front lines of the pandemic. And that is it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. Power and Politics is up next. We'll see you next time.